GM everyone, welcome back to another episode of Touchgrass Podcast. Today we have with us Alan. Me and Rachit worked closely with the QUAI team for a while and been knowing these guys, I don't know, a couple of years now. Seen these guys building to the testnet, mainnet, token launch, and everything. And I mean, with all the talk about stablecoin that's been happening over the last 6 months, the whole craze and whatnot, we wanted to like bring in someone who's building something novel in the space in the stablecoin category, and Quai is building energy-backed stablecoin, and we thought of why not introduce and kind of educate on what that all means in general. But yeah, Alan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, KG, thanks for having me on. Definitely been anticipating getting some time with you guys here. I've been following the pod and loving the content that you've been putting out. So looking forward to a good conversation today.
Appreciate you, Alan. I think KG set the stage pretty well. We've been seeing so much on crypto Twitter lately around native ecosystem stablecoins. We've also we shot a pod with Sai last week, and they talked about proof of work and like how they're expanding it with proof of useful work. Do you want to sort of start us off with like Quai's initial vision? Like what was the vision that the team saw, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, so as you guys have said, you followed the project for some time, but the sort of genesis and origins of Quai go back pretty far. It started as a research project back in 2018 out of the University of Texas at Austin, and it really came from a breakthrough on how to scale proof of work technology. We wanted a system that can be used for payments, achieve that vision that Satoshi had for peer-to-peer cash, and actually create a crypto that you can use day in, day out. So that thesis and idea of a payments chain and utilizing crypto directly with the ideas of censorship resistance, decentralization, financial sovereignty, and giving power back to the people was always kind of in our ethos and in our mind. And so that really inspired us to go down the rabbit hole of figuring out how to actually improve these solutions and improve these blockchains. The first paper was called Block Reduce. That was published in 2018. It was backed by the National Science Foundation for research, and that was the idea of essentially a sharded hierarchy of merge mined blockchains. More technical in nature, and we can dive down some of that rabbit hole, but that's really where we started. And our first fundraise happened in 2022 with Polychain Capital, Alumni Ventures, and a handful of other VCs, and that allowed us to really go deep into what really was needed to achieve a scalable blockchain. During that research and development with testnets, we actually kind of were part of that Silicon Valley Bank collapse where USDC depegged down from $1 to 84 cents. And so it caused us to really, take pause and look at how stablecoins were impacting crypto ecosystems and what it really meant to have a stablecoin. And the idea of what we were doing with proof of work was already so advanced. We've achieved something unique in terms of scalability with proof of work. And then we saw this need for alternative forms of stability that weren't relying on fiat. And so with that use of proof of work, you kind of said useful proof of work, we sort of see this use of proof of work useful in that way of linking a token to the stability of energy into that hash rate that can be actually tokenized directly with the decentralized validator set being that oracle. So technically in the system, we have two tokens. We have QUAI, which is that store value like asset. And we have QI or QI, which is this flat coin or energy dollar, as we call it, that is emitted proportionally to the hash rate in which that link, by emitting it essentially 1-to-1 as an example, one hash gives you one QI. I'll use that as a more straightforward analogy there. Creates a Schelling point that almost makes it look like a flat coin that has no fiat tie, no tie to an issuer like USDC or Tether. It is purely emitted by the nodes on the network like it would for Bitcoin emissions or for any other proof of work token. So for us, that was the key breakthrough there. We've done a lot of great work with researchers in the space. Common Prefix are some of the greatest people in proof of work research, and Stephen Wolfram, also one of our advisors, and a lot of great researchers and minds that have thought about how to design this problem, thermoeconomics as a whole, and what we could do to really have a monetary system based on energy versus fiat and something that is sort of centrally controlled by the banks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
still
what Sorry,
Once
KG. One thing that I wanted to sort of deep dive a little bit more into, Alan, is, you know, I feel like last cycle, proof of work was a lot more consensus. This cycle, proof of stake, a lot more consensus with all the, with Ethereum shifting and then the L2s also following by design. How was sentiment for your team and the investors when that shift was happening? Was there like any sort of uncertainty or question marks where, like, is this something we want to pursue? Talk to us about that era, and then we can sort of deep
Yeah.
dive into stuff that you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a ton of opportunity, and I think we really picked up where Ethereum left off in terms of research. They pivoted away from proof of work, and we saw an area of exploration that really let us go head first. And so where we picked up was Ethereum was on Ethash, and they were going to be moving from Ethash into ProgPow. We picked up on ProgPow and we implemented that into QUAI, which is a better GPU algorithm and something that a lot of developers worked on, and they never got it into Ethereum mainnet. Ethereum itself was also going to have this sharding technology. You remember ETH 2.0 being the meme back in 2020, 2021, and they abandoned that again whenever L2s were a thing. We picked up on sharding, and we have that live today. So a very similar topology to what ETH 2.0 was going to be. And then also, when you look at just the promises that were given with this move to proof of stake, it was really around cheaper fees, better network handling, more access, more distribution, and it didn't lead to any benefit in fees. We saw even higher fees oftentimes with proof of stake during the last bull run. And so to say that proof of stake is a bullet in some way, a silver bullet in some way for these problems, I think is false. And I think that proof of work still has a lot of sort of necessary innovation to achieve better user experience. And so unfortunately, if you look at fundamentals, I'm sure a lot of use cases have trended towards the centralized systems, right? You look at Hyperliquid, you look at a lot of these newer systems, and Hypercore really isn't even a blockchain. It's more of a sort of centralized database. In some regards, you could say the same about Solana coordinating in a Discord server for restarts. And so for us, I think it's tough to compete when you look at use cases on user experience, but where we can compete is by making proof of work as good as it can be and getting very close to the Solana, to the Hyperliquid, to these other chains that are proof of stake. And we can say QUAI works just as good, if not better in some degrees, because you have that level of decentralization and you have that direct way to compete with just a GPU. I can plug in a GPU and I can mine QUAI directly today. I can't, plug in a computer and take part in Solana or Hyperliquid or SWI or some of these other larger proof of stake chains.
Yeah, it's interesting you say like the centralized players, and I think that's more evident for the stablecoin space as well, right? So, like, and we've seen this whole USDH, all these big giant corporations fighting over being the stablecoin issuer for Hyperliquid. Like, where do you see Quai stablecoin in this kind of landscape where, like, there are obviously like decentralized issuers and decentralized stablecoins, but these mega corporations seeing this opportunity, because people always, I mean, I find it so funny when people say that why are there so many stablecoin projects launching or so many stablecoins launching? Bro, it's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. Of course, we are going to see new chains launching every day. So, like, what's your take on where Quai fits as the stablecoin landscape is changing so rapidly? Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a famous tweet that goes around crypto Twitter every now and then where it's like the biggest three product market fits in crypto are exchanges, blockchains, and stablecoins. So people are trying to figure out how to get as much coverage as they can in those three areas. And again, looking at Hyperliquid, they've probably done the best at those three. And with this new USDH, they're going to cover that stablecoin one directly there. But again, a completely different solution and target market from something like QUAI. I see QUAI really as the sort of people's stablecoin, right? It's a network for the people. It's a network for people that want to participate with decentralization, participate in the network, and have a way to have more skin in the game there with the hardware and with the censorship resistance that takes part in it. If you look at, again, I'll continue to use these examples of these centrally issued stablecoins. They're very easy to censor, and they're very easy to manipulate and control. And so all of the downstream effects of that is your DeFi ultimately becomes more centralized in terms of how it's managed. Pools can become censored, blacklisted, and the like. And we've seen that time and time again with the existing stablecoins on the most popular networks today. And so I would say, of course, everybody wants a piece of the pie in stablecoins because they're going to be able to accrue that yield. They're going to be able to not pass on what they're holding in terms of treasuries to users. They're going to essentially come and disrupt the circle and the tether that have been doing it for so long and raking in trillions, billions of fees here. And it is going to emerge to $1 trillion market in the next decade. Like that's a certainty. And so from our side, we still see that original ethos that was really driven by cypherpunks as the dollar is something that we want to disrupt. The dollar is doomed to fail. The denominator is worthless. And the trend right now for bringing stablecoins into crypto is really the Achilles heel of how crypto can become more censorable and more like TradFi that we've been trying to escape for so long. And so to really sort of move into another area, how do we create something that is different outside of that, outside of all of TradFi and outside of the dollar completely? But if you want stability, what do you gauge in terms of the real world to bring in that level of stability? And for us, we found the answer with energy, because energy is a roughly stable asset. We've seen electricity prices actually become pretty stabilized over the past 2 decades, and it actually fares pretty competitively to other fiat pairs. If you look at things like the Canadian dollar or the euro compared to the US dollar, energy prices are a great oracle in that sense. And so having a proof of work system that can issue its own dollar based off of hash rate is a powerful feature that no one else has really accomplished before.
I think KG froze there. Alan, do you want to talk about I think the native stablecoin for each chain is a thesis that has come up now. We saw Mega ETH, we saw USDH. Now, talk to me, and you've been talking about this vision for a while now. What was the vision when this was sort of starting up? Like, was the stablecoin always part of the ecosystem and part of the research that you guys were doing in 2018? When did the stablecoin vision actually come into play, and how did that come into play?
Yeah, so it goes pretty far back in terms of people that have thought about this idea. And the sort of holy grail of stablecoin research is Robert Sam's Seigniorage shares paper that I believe was released in 2011 or 2012. And that paper sort of outlines how to create a stablecoin in various forms or fashion. And at the end of that paper, they say, it's really tricky to create something around hash rate and proof of work, but if someone was able to do it, that would be a big breakthrough. And similarly, Satoshi talked about this idea of Bitcoin's emissions and what they mean. If you look at Bitcoin itself, 4-year halvings are completely arbitrary, and a 21 million hard cap is nothing more than a meme. And if anything, it will actually be one of the things that ends Bitcoin because it will not be able to emit enough tokens to pay for its security and secure its market cap in the future. And so one of the things Satoshi actually looked into is how do we actually create something that is roughly stable that can be used and spendable? Because the things that we discovered as we went through this journey, so to answer your question directly, no, in 2018, we did not know we were going to build an energy dollar. We did not know we were going to build QI, but some of the things that we saw continually in the crypto space as we were developing QUAI as a system is people don't want to spend their crypto. They'd rather hold on to it. So people don't want to spend Bitcoin. They don't want to spend their valuable assets. They would much rather spend a cash-like asset or fiat itself. And so how do we address this property of Gresham's law, which is essentially bad money goes into circulation, good money is what is hoarded. And so Gresham's law, in that sense, requires 2 tokens, and it requires something that is spendable, like cash, that is either roughly stable in value or actually loses value over time, so that it is encouraged to be spent, which looks a lot more like dollars. Dollars lose value over time. And then you want something that accrues value over time, or is more scarce in nature, and that is that store value like asset. And so addressing all properties of money there is something that a blockchain should do. And I think people, when you talk about these systems and why they're needing stablecoins now, is because blockchains are monetary systems. They're monetary devices, and they should function really with the 3 forms of money, which is having a store of value, having a unit of account, and having a medium of exchange. And so why everyone is racing to bring in a stablecoin is because they were missing that unit of account in the system itself. And sure, the sort of counter to that is some people consider assets to be triple point assets. I know a lot of people in the Ethereum community tend to say that a triple point asset is something that can function as all three of those. But I would say Gresham's law is the thing that would counter the idea of a triple point asset, because people don't want to spend something that they want to hoard. And so the sort of rush here to create a stable coin in all of these ecosystems and something that is native is to create that unit of account that can be used as sort of that utility asset in the ecosystem.
Yeah, makes sense. Right now, like in the ecosystem, how is Chi being used, like across apps? How are users like? Because another stablecoin, is it like, because it's like it has a different dynamic, right? Compared to, let's say, someone like Maker, what they are doing, or some of the other DeFi guys, DeFi protocols, how they look at stablecoins. It's pretty integrated into their protocol and other use cases. So when it comes to Quai, like how are you guys integrating your stablecoin across apps and other DeFi use cases?
Yeah, great question. And it's super early for the ecosystem. And with something like Chi, it actually does take time for it to come into circulation because it has that property of being mined. And so right now, there's about $200,000 of liquidity in Chi in a wrapped version. And so there's actually a few benefits to Chi itself as an asset, because not only does it have this stability-like characteristic, but it also has privacy-like characteristics and actually makes it look like cash. And so for that payments use case, if we look at other traditional stablecoins and I want to go spend it for a coffee or a hot dog or a lemonade, well, all of that is going to be on chain directly, and people can see where I spend my stablecoins. And so that hot dog merchant can see, who is actually coming in, and then also competitors can see who their customers are. And so we addressed some of these problems with having this spendable asset by adding in privacy-like characteristics with cash features there. And so for us, again, focusing on that for merchant adoption is key. We have a few apps that we're working on that allow for direct peer-to-peer payments with that, and actually going and spending it in stores and adding ways in which we can bolster that ecosystem of spending essentially what looks like an energy dollar economy, or having merchants take part in that. That is also used in DeFi with the wrapped version, as I said, with the liquidity growing there. And so having that as a way in which you can pair that with assets, use it as a unit of account in these pools, and have something that is more robust and decentralized compared to traditional stables that are more centralized there. So for us, the opportunities are really limitless. I think that it kind of goes downstream of just kind of building the foundational use cases there in terms of adoption, acceptance, and bootstrapping supply, and then going on and doing more with ways in which you could potentially drive LP incentives. You can do bonus programs. You can do ways in which people can do additional staking if you're supplying this asset to a pool. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of, it's a mixed bag of approach here, but payments is definitely core to the thesis.
That makes sense. And I think one thing that you highlighted, in terms of building an ecosystem, one thing that I think people from this cycle probably don't understand is, the challenges in building and scaling a proof of work network. Do you want to talk a little bit about, like, what are common problems that any proof of work network faces, and how typically a team addresses them, and how your team has addressed them this cycle?
Yeah, I mean, building any ecosystem is a challenge, right? When you look at the crypto space as a whole, I've been in it since 2015, 2016, and we've seen it evolve into something that is a lot more mercenary and a lot more cutthroat. I mean, just the things in which, people are having to do to really kind of feel like every time it's like the last cycle, right? And like we all kind of feel like this is the last time to really build anything useful, versus having an abundance mindset and seeing the future where crypto continually eats the world and becomes more relevant. And so for us, I think it's about finding people that want to contribute value. And I don't know if it's just a proof of work problem. I think it's an ecosystem building problem entirely across the board, where you want builders that are aligned with your mission rather than just building a project and then leaving and going to the next thing. You want people to see kind of what the future looks like and see it from your perspective and see why that can be better than the existing systems. And for us, some of the challenges that we face is just keeping everyone motivated, keeping a large set of people all aligned whenever there are so many things popping up in the crypto space, and really having people kind of see what we're seeing and what we're building. And I think that we've done a good job of maintaining that. And I think that over cycles, you kind of see different hype and you see different people come around, and ultimately we're starting to see so many things converge onto what Quai has already done, And it's hilarious because it feels like in so many cases, we've done all of this work, and sure, we could have launched a token 4 years ago and continually tried to upgrade an L1, but we took our time and we made sure that we really thought through everything. And all the people that sort of went away and did something different are now coming back and saying, well, this is interesting, and we should really dive in more to this, and we should see why these guys did it this way and learn from that. And so I think for this cycle, it's going to be a lot of people kind of either coming back to Quai or rediscovering it, or even seeing it for the first time and saying, there's a lot of really interesting pieces here that have fixed a lot of fundamental problems in crypto, and we should take it seriously.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said earlier about, like anyone with a GPU can essentially be part of the network for Quai. I think a great CTA and a great clip for us from this pod would be, can you explain how someone can mine on Quai?
Yeah.
Like what's like the basic way that anyone can sort of participate in the network?
Yeah, let me see if I have any sitting around here. So here's I always have a couple GPUs sitting around somewhere. So, you got a GeForce, I believe this is a 3070, but you just grab one of these, you pop them in a desktop, and that's something that's going to allow you to get 40, 50 mega hash on the system. And so, you're one of 20,000 GPUs, but even then we have ways in which that you can get paid out directly without mining pools. And so solo mining on Quai is something that's very real and something that many people are doing today. And so participating directly with the system with very light node requirements. So something that looks like a gaming PC is going to be able to download the blockchain, get up to speed, and allow you to put that GPU to use and mine Quai today. So for us, those are some of the things that we focus on directly is making sure that people have that sort of redundancy and that distribution in ways in which that other blockchains are a lot harder to get access to.
That makes sense. I want to shift gears here, Alan, a little bit. Thanks so much for showing the GPU. That's the first time we've actually had a GPU on the show, which is kind of crazy, KG, considering we should have done that a while ago.
It should be plugged in. I'm wasting it by having it sitting here.
Yeah. Recently, Wormhole also announced our partnership with Quai. It's on the roadmap, and we are going to be integrating very soon. Alan, one thing that would be really awesome for our audience is, what are other partnerships, features, expansions that you and the team are really excited about that you want to?
Definitely. One of the things that have been on the roadmap for a long time is our Kraken listing. So that's actually a direct chain integration, which is exciting. So if you look at the Kraken listings for chain integrations, it's like us, Hyperliquid, and Hedera. So it's like we're a big outlier there in terms of size. So definitely glad to be working with the Kraken team on that one. We have a budding ecosystem of apps coming along. Kipper is definitely one of the things that we've been putting a lot of resources into in terms of making that a really good product. So Kipper is an app that allows you to tip directly in X with Quai and also with tokens on Solana. So there's a few, including Sol itself. So sort of bridging ecosystems that way and getting a little bit of eyes in the Solana ecosystem. Well, it should be good for Kipper adoption. And we've actually seen a pretty good user acquisition that way. And so we've done, I believe, like 23,000 tips. There have been about 950 active tippers and different people that have actually gone into Kipper and tipped with the platform. And it's a good way for creators to engage with their community directly. And so if you have people that you're looking to incentivize, or if you're looking to earn directly with your content, we're moving into an era where InfoFi is a little played, and we're looking at ways in which to get the word out for different projects. And so streamer coins and ways in which people can do coins with streaming on Pump Fund 2 has kind of been experimented with. But even then, having a coin associated with you is something that people may not always want. And so if you want something that looks, again, a little more like just direct payments and tips, then Kipper is a great option, because people can just pay you directly, and they can just send you a tip in X itself in that platform, compared to Nostr or Farcaster or other platforms that kind of don't have your audience on. And so for us, again, that kind of goes back to the broader theme of payments, because we were sitting on a space and we were just like, hey, it would be cool to send anyone Quai right now. We want to use it for payments. We want to use it for interaction. And so we went and built the application, and we're seeing great adoption there. And we actually have a mobile version of it coming as well. So You can use it on your phone. You can have a wallet directly on your phone, and you can tip that way. Outside of that, Blip is another application that we are heads down working on. We have a new version of Blip just released, in which that is the sort of merchant acquisition and target adoption for peer-to-peer payments. So definitely expect a lot of announcements coming on that. As always, the Pelagus wallet is one of the sort of key cornerstones of the ecosystem. We have a huge reskin coming for that. So light mode, dark mode, and additional fixes for using Qi. So doing the features that we just talked about throughout this pod and making Qi easier to access in Pelagus and in the wallet directly.
Awesome. Yeah, I've seen the recent updates as well. I mean, you mentioned like a lot of use cases around payments and obviously centered around your stablecoin. Like, is that like the direction you're going with here, or it's like we're just gonna build everything around payments, and that's like the main driver for Quai?
I mean, I think it's a yes and, right? And if you look at what stands out, the key value drivers that we have created an ecosystem around, payments is something that we still haven't seen solved. And you look at even the latest announcements with Stripe creating a chain and all of these payment providers creating a chain. We've already ran this playbook in 2017 and 2018. We had R3, we had Corda, we had Libra. None of those worked. And so you want a chain to have the most decentralization and the most censorship resistance and the most credibly neutral form of accessing these mechanisms of payments. And so, I won't say Tempo will probably fail out of the gate. They have a ton of great backers and a ton of support. I'm sure it'll do really well for Stripe. But when you look at the future of where these chains need to head, you need something that is actually this credibly neutral monetary layer. And to achieve that with payments, we see Quai as the best option for the future. And so for us, yeah, I see that as bread and butter, but also just a unique area that hasn't been addressed well. And then when you look at what we're doing with Wormhole too, DeFi is key. And I think the reasons why we haven't succeeded as well in DeFi is just because you need some of that bridging infrastructure to have that natively get access to things like, as much as I hate to say it, the centralized stablecoins. Sure, while we have this energy dollar, we see it as a necessary evil to have things like USDT and USDC directly on Quai, because that helps with adoption, it helps with liquidity, and it helps with broader access for the dApps and the ecosystem projects building on your chain. So of course, that's something we want to grow as well. And I see kind of, again, different buckets for different things. And while payments is key, we still see other areas that we want to grow.
Has there ever been a moment, Alan, where, with your focus on decentralization and like censorship resistance, where you were like, maybe we will have to index a little less on these things to make this happen? Like, do you feel like with the current landscape of hyperliquid and all these, I wouldn't say central, but like lesser decentralized applications seeing success, has that been something that you look at and thought like, okay, maybe we would want to index the other way? Has that affected your thought process this cycle?
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like, if something isn't properly decentralized, it's like the lifespan of a turkey that gets slaughtered on Thanksgiving, right? It's like, it's really great, everything's really good, and then all of a sudden it literally doesn't work at all. And I remember just like 2 months ago, Hyperliquid was down for like a day, or like I think probably like 3 or 4 hours, and everyone was freaking out. And then all of a sudden, all right, cool, it's back on. And it's like, that's good if that's the experience that you're comfortable with. But at the same time, like, if you're building an entire monetary system, like Bitcoin doesn't go down. Ethereum has had some outages in its history. And then kind of down the list as well, you get into Solana, which has had more outages. And so to accomplish that prime use case, which for us, it's going to be a very ambitious vision to go take on something like Bitcoin. And I would say that that's the same for any team. But crypto has very asymmetric outcomes, and it is possible to grow from something like what Quai is to go take on something like Bitcoin. And to do that, you want to have as little downtime as possible with the most reliability as possible. And at some point, that is a bottleneck, and that is something that when you get to some of those top levels has to be addressed.
Yeah, I think like what I've seen, I think decentralization in general was something people were obsessed with maybe last cycle. Like what I'm seeing right now is people still kind of value the whole ethos and what crypto is about, but I think they care more about user experience, obviously. And I think some Jeff from Hyperliquid and others mentioned as well, is that like end user, they probably doesn't care that much about decentralization, but they really care about being permissionless, transparency, and those are the things they really value. And indexing on that kind of is kind of giving these insane outcomes that we're seeing over the last this cycle. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I would love to see more and more new kind of stablecoins succeed. I think
No, but
it's
I
good.
think KG, that's what Alan's saying, right? Like it's good till it's good, but then it's not good. It's like
Mm.
a ticking, like I wouldn't say a time bomb, but like the,
Yeah,
all these outages, I think that's what Alan's end like meaning out of that was. Um, Alan, I know we only scheduled the 30, and we're like really over. Like we just have like two more questions for you. Uh,
Good. Yeah.
uh,
Let's keep rocking.
all the CTAs for our audience. You guys are building a lot of cool stuff. There is an ecosystem that's actively building on Quai. What's something that you wish was being built on Quai that currently isn't?
Oh man, I would love to see a decentralized GPU marketplace for buying and selling hash rate. I think that'd be really cool to see. So doing that with Quai and having that all kind of with the base assets of Quai and Qi, because you can do a lot in terms of utilizing Qi as an asset for payments just digitally. And so I want to make a point too. So when you going back to KG's kind of assessment there, when you go use the system and you actually go interact with it, it's improved a lot in the past 4 months. And if you were to go use Kipper and X today, you would actually think it looks a lot like Solana or a layer two. And to have that experience be just as good, if not better, than some of those other competitors. And so I think it would lead many people to be like, I didn't know proof of work, a chain could operate like that. I think it's old and archaic, but I'm doing microtransactions on social media instantly. And so for us, we see that as a key unlock. In terms of kind of going back to this front, for us, I think it's all about, hold on, I went back once, so kind of restate your question there, Rashid, when I want to make sure I pick up properly.
No, yeah, for sure. The question was, what would you wish was being built on Quai
People
that
building.
currently?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the GPU marketplace is a key one, and then more DeFi. So having Wormhole and unlocking that, I think that's going to be ways in which people can do all sorts of interesting strategies with Qi and yield programs and really kind of bolstering the ecosystem that way that we haven't even thought of yet.
Is there a way to long and short electricity? I know me, KG, have been pushing this ever since we've been working together with you guys. Has that been something you guys have been thinking about?
Yeah, you can kind of do that natively on chain. There's a few partners. I believe Stork is one of our partners that can help oracleize some of that to create that type of perp on Quai. And so that's definitely been a strong request from people. And then you can do some interesting strategies with Qi directly there.
yeah. I think I would just say forever long electricity costs until solar becomes. I've seen this chart recently from someone saying over the last 5 or 6 years, the average, I think it went from 3% to 4.5% or something, the increase in cost of electricity, which is pretty crazy on how much these data centers and these AI they're consuming. Uh, but yeah, on the
I think, I
last,
think, I think the other KG. I think the other interesting use case here is if you live in the States and you wanted to hedge your electricity bill, you could just short electricity on Quai, and you would basically have a hedge on your electricity bill every month, which I think is really interesting. I think that's the sort of things that we'll sort of see as the ecosystem progresses.
yeah,
I would love, yeah, go
we
for it.
we said it last time, right? Like purpify everything.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
talked about that.
I think that is the trend. Unfortunately, that's the trend. Is you're seeing a lot more of the hyper gambling, a lot more of the perpification of everything, and a lot less of the fundamentals of you know the way in which we see the world in crypto. And I think that use case of long, short electricity on leverage is something in the ecosystem that would be interesting. It would play directly with the narrative, and then also with a way in which it's actually usable, right? And can tie in. People are actually somewhat doing that with Qi as they mine. And so I didn't dive too deep into this, and we actually didn't cover too much of like the energy market as a whole, because I agree. I think electricity prices are going to continue to go up with the current age of AI and the consumption that it takes, and we're not building enough energy production fast enough. And so having an electricity dollar and having a way that Qi can be mined between Quai and Qi sort of also embeds a long or a short position on what you're doing to hash rate. So some of the miners are playing that game directly today. That's kind of more nuanced, but yeah, that's an interesting arbitrage that is currently underway.
Are there any other arbitrage strategies that you'd want to point out that you find interesting that people are doing with Qi, Quai, or the energy market in general?
Yeah, so the current one right now that a lot of people are looking at is the wrapped Qi to the actual native Qi arbitrage. So depending on where the controller stabilizes, you can sort of go take part in wrapping and unwrapping Qi and being a market maker there. So we've seen a few people go and make that market efficient, which is good because it also helps kind of reinforce the controller design around tying it back to electricity.
Awesome. KG, this is my last question to Alan, and then you're free to ask another one. Alan, so we usually end the episodes with like number one advice to people. I feel like since you have the most experience building a native stablecoin experience with an ecosystem, what would be your number one advice to any ecosystem that's looking to incubate a native stablecoin today?
Yeah, I think that's interesting because we've tackled it in a different way, right? So I wouldn't know the proper flow of getting liquidity from traditional stablecoin sources and providers, and I think that market will be saturated. Whereas what we're doing is something differentiated and it stands out on its own, and I think it's a little harder to bootstrap, but in the long term, that's our vision and that's our way in which that we see a flat coin or a monetary system should be designed. And so I think differentiation and awareness in this market is key, and finding the people that see that vision and want to use the product and real users and real community, and differentiating that from the people in crypto that are just kind of there to ride your hype cycle is really key. And as a founder that's been in the space for a pretty long time, you want to keep those people that are actually your fans close and keep the and keep building. And you need to have a passion for what you're building, because it's easy to burn out in this space. And the people that have been around for many cycles, I'd say, are kind of dwindling, and we can get a crazy, rise in Bitcoin and actual adoption, and crypto can continue to grow. But sometimes it feels like all the people that have been around are less so, because they either get jaded or burnt out on what crypto is actually doing today.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, but I think the more and more stable coins that come out, it's also going to cause like the fragmentation problem as well. There's like 3 stable coins already, and there's a different version on each chain, and it's just going to, I think, create a lot more UX kind of problems. But we'll see. But yeah, Alan, this was amazing. It's always good to chat with you, and it's been a while. We should do this more often. But yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, number one rule as a crypto founder: go touch grass. So.
I think that's like the perfect clip.
Thanks, Alan.